Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're gonna paint a fluffy duckling in watercolor. We're gonna use 7 different colors, and I'm using the, actually my signature set of Turner watercolors through jerrysartorama.com. They're back in stock right now, so I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for this set, and that and the Lucas set is back in stock right now. Between the two, I really like the Turners best. They're a little bit more transparent, but the downside is you have to provide your own palette or use like a ceramic dish or something for them. What I do is I have them in pans, and I put them in a larger palette here. And then I just have this little extra tray that I put the ones that I'm using for a lesson on video in here. If I was just painting on my own, I would just open up my palette and go, but I think this makes it a little bit easier to teach because then I only have these 7 colors here showing. So the colors we have is our Red Rose, Gamboge, Naples Yellow. Now you could use, instead of using Gamboge and Naples Yellow, you could just use Yellow Ochre, but I just had a hankering to paint with Naples Yellow today, and so that's why I'm using those two. So if you don't have either of those 2 colors, grab your Yellow Ochre. It's going to work just fine. Burnt Umber, Phthalo Blue, Turquoise, and this is a pretty cobalt turquoise. It comes in the set, but if you just have phthalo blue, you can omit the turquoise, and hooker's green, and if you don't have hooker's green, you can use sap green. I'm just giving some colors that I don't use all the time, a little love today. We're going to start off by sketching, and I'm just using a regular HB pencil, and a real easy sketch, so don't be intimidated if you're not someone who likes to draw. It's not that tough. We're gonna do a lumpy oval. Think of like a number 8, okay, or a peanut. Okay, and that's how you're going to draw your oval. Now, I'm drawing this a little bit darker than you'll want to, because I want to make sure you can see. Okay, see, it looks kind of like a Mr. Potato Head, or a lumpy fat peanut, or something. That's a shape that you want to begin. And then what you're going to do is I want you to draw just a little bit. It's almost like you're connecting your lump to make like a little bit of a circle. This line's going to get erased, so just do it real light. See that? And then I want you to make a we're gonna, let's see, what's the easiest way to do this? I think we're gonna start here. We're gonna make a V in the middle. Okay, so we're adding a V, and then we are going to make a stripe up from the V going to the back of the head like that. Okay, so we're gonna carry that V up so it goes up to the middle of the lump. All right, now we're gonna make another V up here, and this is gonna go down. It's gonna go right down to the center of that V. So you're bringing lines like that. Okay, you're probably thinking, Lindsay, what are you doing? This looks crazy. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Now what we're going to do on this V line, we're going to do an oval. Make sure the oval, the skinny ends of the oval are on that line on both sides. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing over here. Make sure it's lined up like the same height as that oval. So let's see, I think I need that a little bit higher. I'm gonna rub that line out. Now this is a mechanical eraser. This is a Bic mechanical pencil, and I find that their erasers are nice and gentle, so they're fine for doing this. I'm just gonna come over and make myself a little mark so I can line that up really well. I'm just gonna do a little oval there. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're gonna make the beak. So that first V that we made, we are going to bring a line down, just slightly taper it out a little bit on each side. Then we are going to just keep bringing it out till you're almost to the bottom of the peanut there. Then you're going to bring the lines down straight. All right, so we've got some foreshortening on this beak, so the beak's going to look way bigger than you think it should be, so don't worry. If it looks too big, then you're doing it right. And then we're just going to kind of round it at the bottom. And we're going to give it a little bit of a kiss, a little bit of a kissy face right there at the end, okay? Now go through and erase the line that went in between the beak there, and then you're going to put nostrils just a little bit above that line that you just erased. Okay, so that's our head. Now underneath that, we're going to start a kind of like a fluffy half circle. Okay, so we got this half circle. No bottom on it, just kind of a half circle. And then we're going to do kind of a smaller, just kind of like a quarter circle there. And then we're going to do a half circle here. All right, so then at the bottom, what you're going to do This is going to be the water line. Where the duckling is in the water. All right, I know this looks real rough, but that's really all you need. Now, if you don't like this drawing business and you want to go online, I will have a link to the reference photo, and you could print it out and trace that if you prefer. All right, so what we're going to do is flip this over, and we're going to use either a spray bottle or a big paintbrush with water, and you're going to wet the back of your paper. Really get it good and wet. In fact, I like to also just grab a brush, and any brush will do that's just big and soft, and spread that out. You can even wet your painting board. This is just a self-healing mat. And stick that right down. There we go. Now we're going to wet the front of the paper. And again, whatever, you can use a 1/2-inch brush, you can use a 1-inch brush. Just you could spray it, but if you do spray it, just brush over it as well so you can smooth out that paper. Okay, notice how it's sticking real good to your backing board. That is what you want. And the advantage to this is that if you are painting someplace where it's really warm and dry, really arid, or like in the mountains where it's just drier, thinner air, this is going to keep your paper wetter a little bit longer, because that's something that I see people get frustrated with a lot, is how fast their paper dries. So now we're going to use a round brush. You could do anywhere between a number 6 round to a number 12 round. Whatever size you're doing, match the brush to the size. I'm going to use a number 10 right here. But, you know, I could easily use an 8 or a 6 here if I wanted to. This is a 6-inch by 9-inch piece of watercolor paper. This is the B watercolor paper, and people have had a hard time getting it recently because the B company was sold, but I do believe they're going to be getting it. They're going to be selling it again once the whole sale is all finalized and everyone's gotten settled back in over there. I'm using the Naples yellow, and you'll notice when I'm painting and I've got the back of the paper wet, you don't get as much flow. It kind of calibrates the paper so that the paint stays where you put it. All right, I'm going to put a little bit of this here. And my board is at a slight angle. Oh, I got a cat here in my dish. What's new, right? Excuse me. Let's do a little bit back here. And a little bit over there. We can also do a little bit on the end of the tail. And we can do a little bit over here as well. Now, my drawing is a little bit darker than what you're going to want probably, so just kind of keep that in mind. Now I'm going to grab some Gamboge. Now, if you're using yellow ochre, just keep on using yellow ochre. I'm going to grab some Gamboge. I'm going to add a little bit into some of the areas where I want it to be a little bit brighter. And down here in the front. Now I'm going to grab a little bit of burnt umber. I'm going to add it right to that mix. Now your paint is going to shift lighter, especially when you have your paint this juicy and you have your paper this wet. So keep that in mind. So you want to go a little bit darker than what you want to end up in. If you have it the right color right now, then it's not going to be the right color when you're done. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're going. Now I went a little bit out of the line. I'm not going to worry about that because we still got water to paint and you would have some reflection. So there's nothing to get bothered with, to get freaked out about at this stage of the game. I'm going to get a little bit of that in here. And we're going to put some over here as well. This is the wet into wet layer. Now I'm just going to take the burnt umber on its own. I'm going to add some into the tail. Now let's say you wanted to paint something, but you didn't want your colors to blend at all, but you wanted your paper to stay drier. Stay wetter as you're working around in different areas. You can wet the back and then just only wet the areas of your paper that you want to blend. So that's something you can do as well if you're living in a climate where it's really dry. And I know there's, it's winter, it's just getting to be summer in the northern hemisphere and it's just getting to be winter in the southern hemisphere. So, if it's winter and it's cold where you live and you've got the heat on, that's going to make your paint dry fast. If it's summer and it's hot and the air is dry, that's going to make your paint dry fast. So you just want to kind of I think everybody could be dealing with a little bit of that right now. I'm going to paint that stripe in, right like that. Now I'm using my paint a lot thicker. Notice how I'm just picking it up off the pan of dried color. When I get my paints, what I do is I dry them either in pans or in a palette, and I like to let them dry before I use them. And the reason for that is because I feel like I have more versatility in what I can do for techniques that way. I'm pulling out a few wispy hairs. See, it's going to hold my brush stroke a lot better when I'm picking up the dry paint from the pan. Now, some artists prefer to use their paint wet. That's completely fine. It's on what you like. And I've noticed that sometimes if you're using a paint that's like a student grade paint, maybe you're getting started with a lesser expensive paint, you may find that when you let it dry in the pans and it's hard to re-wet it, or it just cracks and falls out and it's frustrating. Well, you can add a little honey or glycerin to your paint if that's the case. Or, you know, that might be a situation where you just want to go ahead and use that straight from the tube. It's completely up to you. Different artists are going to have different opinions on this. So, you know, you try both ways and see what works best for you. This works best for me because then I can control how much water I want to add in. And that's kind of how I prefer to work. I want to get some little fluffs on the tail feathers. Use your brush straight up and down. I'm sorry if my hand gets in the way there. And you want to put these strokes in. Imagine if you were to pet this duck, like what direction will the feathers go? That's the direction you want to put your strokes in. You don't want to paint against the grain, you know? It's like if you ever pet a cat and you pet the opposite way, they don't like that. All right, neither. So think about that when you're like, you should paint your animals like you're petting a cat. Go with the grain. I really wanted to paint a fluffy bird today. So the feathers can go down around the curved body, or they can go back away from the head. Look at all the beautiful textures that we can bring up here. I do have a class that's just on painting birds. If you're interested, on my in my Teachable School, I'll link it up down below. Birds are one of my favorite subjects to paint. I really like to paint birds. I love painting flowers. I think we all like, you know, we'll have our own preferences and we all figure out what we like to paint best. But I don't think anything's harder than anything else to paint. It's just, you know, it's just getting used to it and, you know, realizing how things go. All right, now for the beak, we want kind of like a grayish color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that brown and I'm going to add some blue to it. And I think I'm going to go with a turquoise just because the turquoise is a little bit softer. You can use phthalo blue if you don't have turquoise. Usually I use like burnt umber or burnt sienna plus ultramarine blue, but I didn't want to add ultramarine blue to this palette because it's got a really strong, the reference photo has a real strong like teal bias to it, and I wanted to keep that. So I'm just going to go in and give this a base coat here, and I don't want it too dark because the beak is reflecting light, so you're not seeing a lot of dark here. And everything is still wet, but you'll notice that your brush strokes will stay pretty much where you put them. And then, oh my gosh, I don't know why I'm so froggy. Let me take a tissue here, or a paper towel, and I'm going to just lift out a little bit of a highlight. And I also want to lift out a little, I don't know how well that highlight will stay on the wet paper, but a little bit of highlight on the center and on the edge. Okay, another thing you could do that's a little bit more controlled is that you could dry your brush off really well. And you can lift out highlights that way. And that should also, by drying up these little areas on the edges, should keep them from spreading too much. Remember, this is a first layer. Oh, he's cute, isn't he? Now for the little kissy, the tip of his mouth looks like he has a kiss, right? I'm going to take a little bit of the red rose. I'm going to mix it with, you can use a smaller brush. You don't want a lot of water in this. I'm going to mix it with the yellow mix, to the Naples yellow and the Gamboge. I think it had a little bit of brown in there. I'm just going to take that and throw that right, a little bit more pink, a little bit more of that red rose. I love that. That red rose is probably my favorite red because it's just so transparent and it doesn't like shift. Sometimes like your crimsons will shift if it's a true alizarin crimson, which I really don't like the true alizarin crimson. They can go kind of rusty looking when they're dry, kind of bloody looking. I like the quinacridone based reds because you get a cleaner red. That looks a little bright, but it's going to dry a lot duller, so I wouldn't worry about that. But while you've got that on your brush, I would go through and just add a little bit here and there so we can harmonize that color in, since we haven't used it anywhere else. It's not bright red, so it's not going to look like, you know, the duck is wounded. It's just going to help give us a little harmony as we work through our painting here. Okay, the next thing I want to do before this dries, while this is still at that same level of wetness, is I want to put the background in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some phthalo blue. And now I'm going to add some of this to the background. Now, what I want you to do is leave some air, leave some reflections, okay? You don't want to fill everything in because then you're just going to have to go and lift it out later. And phthalo blue is very staining, so you definitely don't want to, you know, leave something, you don't want to paint something that you think you want lighter later because you're just going to struggle with that. Phthalo blue is one of our stainings. Your quinacridone colors stain too, so that red, that would be a stainer right there. So just kind of you'll get to know your palette, your paints, the more you use them. I'm also going to add some of this color down closer to the duck. Oops, I'm going to turn my palette so you can see it. How's that? All I did was add some water to that. I really enjoy these ceramic palettes, but a plain old plate will work just as well. I probably would keep it for just painting use, especially if you're using artist grade pigments, just because they can have some chemicals that you wouldn't want to get into your food. I mean, you can wash a ceramic plate really well, but you know, just go to the dollar store, get one for your painting. It is so nice to mix on ceramic. And it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be expensive. You pay a lot for like ceramic palettes because they are such a specific use, whereas like it's the same quality porcelain that's in like dinner plates, but since they're only being used for, you know, everybody has dinner plates, right? They have a big market they can sell to. They're not very expensive. I like to, if I find like a really cool looking plate, I will often buy it to use as a palette because it is just, it works so well and it's kind of fun. Okay, now I'm going to grab a little bit of the new Gamboge here. I'm going to add it to that green just to give it a little bit more warmth. I'm going to add some of that down here because we got some like weeds and grasses, so I just want to kind of get that color in there, and I think I might even just spatter a little bit over that in the water too. All right, now something else that we can have is some of the duck colors in the water. So I will do a little bit of the burnt umber because usually it's a little darker in the water. And I can actually put a little bit of that red in there because I see the feet. I just want to get like just some indication that the feet is under the water pedaling. Add a little yellow to that. And just get a little bit of a duck color in the water too. Alright, what you want to do at this point is make sure you don't have any puddles. If you do have some puddles, you just want to take care of them. Like what I would do is dry your brush off and just kind of, you can just set it in there, kind of lift it up. But generally things stay pretty good this way. Oh, I also want to get some of that turquoise in the water while we're at it. I just like to, you know, even if I'm not mixing the color, I still like to just kind of work it out on the palette a bit to make sure that it's not going to have a big glob on my brush, or I'm going to know about what value I have. I want this to be a little bit darker back here, so I'm just going in with a little bit more phthalo. You can always layer on more, guys, but you can't take it away. But see right there where I got that streak? I did not work that out well enough on my palette, so I got a little streak there. Not the end of the world, but it's not what I wanted. And I want more green. I think I might want a little bit of brown in my green. The other nice thing about having your palette dry down is that, like, I can go from paint to paint and not contaminate all that paint. If I do get a little smudge on the top, I can wipe that off really easily. So it saves me a little time because I don't have to clean my my brushes. I don't end up adding water when I don't want to. So this is the Hooker's Green, Burnt Umber, and whatever residual phthalo blue I had on my brush. Sometimes you just kind of keep adding paint until you're like, yep, that looks right. You learn to trust your gut. I like to also bring like a visual element to bring like the viewer through the picture. So by having connecting your kind of colors so that you make a path for the eye to follow, that helps a lot. Alright, so this is going to dry a smidgen lighter. I can let this dry, and then when we come back, we will add some more details to it. Okay, I did go ahead and dry my paper, and now what we're going to do is we're going to switch to a smaller brush, and we're going to start detailing at the center of the face we're going to work out, because that's the focal point. That's where we're going to want most of our detail, and sometimes it's hard to know when to stop. And if you just kind of start in the area you know you're absolutely going to want to detail in, it's going to be a lot easier. Now my paper does have a little bit of a poof to it, but it's not really wrinkly, and it would definitely flatten out fine in a frame. So that's another reason I like doing that, like wetting the background, because when it does dry, it dries pretty flat, and you don't have to really, you know, tape it down or mess with it or anything like that. So I'm going to take the phthalo blue, and I'm going to take the burnt umber and mix those together. It's got a little bit of a green undertone, so then I'm going to take some of the rose red. I just need just enough in there to alter it a bit. When I'm cleaning my brush, I'm actually drying it on my tissue there, so whoops, what did I need? Oh yeah, I need a little bit more red. There we go. So we got a nice kind of blackish color here. And I'm going to start by painting the nostrils in. I'm going to start on my darkest and work lighter, which I know is not the way a lot of watercolorists work, but I like to get those darker values in. We did our lighter values overall in, but now that we're working in detail here, I like to get my darkest values in first because it just helps me assign them and make sure I have everything where I need it to be. These little kind of sunflower seed shapes for eyes, and I'm just putting in the kind of the pupils and the outline a little bit lighter on this side. You seem to have more light on this side of the painting, so from the reference photo, so I don't want to put so much dark there. I do want to get the pupil in here, but there's a highlight at the top of the eye, so I want to leave that. He's gonna look kind of wacky-eyed right now. That's fine. He looks like he's got cross eyes, but it'll work out. It's fine. It's just I want to preserve that light at the top. I'm going to grab a little bit of burnt umber. Grab some of that darker color into it, and I'm going to add, use my brush straight up and down. I hope my hand's not going to be in the way for you, but I need to add the little feathers on that stripe. And keep bringing those feathers back to the back of the head like that. The same thing here in the front. These Mimic brushes hold quite a bit of pigment and water, so you don't have to reload too often. You could use a liner brush if you want. You'll have a little less control with a liner brush because it's a longer, floppier bristle. And then I'm just going to wisp these back because the hair is much lighter at the top. I might even add a little colored pencil to that later. And I'm going to do the same over here around this eye. So we got this dark area of feathers. It starts right at the edge of the beak and works back by and kind of goes past the eye there. And just keeps on going to the back of the head like that. And we also have a little bit of that. It's almost like it's like a little smile off the edge of the beak. We have a little bit of a dark feather back there too. And on the other side. Interesting patterning on the duck, but that's kind of what you want to get. You want to get those interesting patterns in because it makes it interesting. Alright, so now I'm going to take some of this color here. It's okay that it's got a blue tint to it because the light's blue. Your outside, your daylight is kind of blue. I'm going to get some of the shadows here. And put a little more burnt umber in there. That's probably a little too blue. The other nice thing about mixing on a ceramic surface is that you the paint spreads out a little bit better, so you can see what your actual color is. So, 'cause sometimes when you're mixing on and enameled palettes, like metal palettes like this, are also good. They will let your paint spread out because it's got that glassy enamel coating. But plastics will bead up sometimes. If you do get a metal palette and it is beading up like that, then what you can do is use like a magic eraser or dish soap and a sponge and just kind of clean it. It probably has some grease on it from the factory. You clean that off and that works pretty good. When you are looking at something and you're trying to paint it realistically, what you want to do is not tell yourself what it is. So when I'm looking at this this face here, this beak, I am not saying I'm painting a duck's beak. I'm just looking for light and shadow. And you will have times, and I call it the hot mess stage, when your painting looks like a hot mess. And that's fine. You kind of have to hit those times to get to the other side and get to the end where it looks good. So don't be frustrated if you're like halfway through a painting and you don't think it's working and it just looks like a mess. It will come around. You just haven't painted it far enough. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the red, the rose red. I'm seeing some reflections of a little bit of that reddish tint to it. Very subtle. I mean, it's just such a, it's a barely noticeable undertone. I just want to get some of that in there too. A little bit back to that Gamboge red and brown mix. Maybe a little bit more red in there. The tip of the beak there needs a little bit of that. Okay, now I think I will switch to a liner. A liner is just a small round with really long hairs. See? It's got long hairs on it. And I'm going to go in with the burnt umber. I think I'll add a little Naples yellow to that. Naples yellow is quite opaque, so it will kind of make your mix a little milky looking. So I don't like to use, I like to use it in washes, but I also like to use it kind of like at the end where I'm not going to put anything over it. I'm just going to do some of these wispy. We'll do some around the, just around the face, straight up and down brush. Remember your direction as you're doing the feathers, so you don't end up, you know, painting them at a different angle. You do a little bit of that up here where it's going to be a little bit lighter. Little baby duck furs or feathers are so fluffy. And that's really what I'm going for. Just getting out of the water. And you get some of these clumped together for feathers. I keep wanting to call them fur because they're clumped, so it looks kind of furry. So they're either going to go like down around the curve of the body, or they're going to go kind of off to the side. But they're still going to be, you know, bent in a way that they're kind. You can tell they're growing like on the contour of the body and growing kind of back and down. You want to load that brush up with as much as it will hold. That way you won't have to reload too frequently. You'll be able to get a lot of little strokes in one loading of the brush. And I also want, you know, I want some of that color back there, but I don't think I want these fine strokes because I don't want them to be really in focus like they are over here. All right, I'm going to go back to that number 2 round, and I'm going to take the Naples yellow on its own. And I'm going to add some little wisps of that. Some up here in the face. And at the top of the head. I need that a little bit wetter. Naples yellow does contain a bit of a white. I feel like that really gives that fluff to the top of the head. And we can do some in here as well. And we'll do some over here. Now I want to go in with some burnt umber. Mix it up into this mix here. I like to take colors that I've already used to kind of mix into the dirty areas of my palette, because then I know I'm going to get harmony that way. But if you feel like your mixes are muddy a lot of the time and you struggle with that, I probably wouldn't do that technique yet. I would wait until you're until you've got a better control over like what mixes, you know, how to mix colors and keep them from getting muddy. But as long as you're not getting, you know, muddy mixes, I would try that once in a while to keep your, you know, your paintings in harmony. Get a little bit of a shadow. The front of her chest here is really slicked with water, so I want to get some kind of just kind of slick down feather look. So I'm just kind of going back and forth in this curved method. So this is stuck down to her body, so it's going to follow the curve of her chest. I'm going to follow the contour. I can also take this color and I can go right along that edge that we drew, and I can drag some of that up. That's going to give us that nice water line that we need. And I'm going to grab a little bit more of the burnt umber. Maybe just a little bit of that dark color that we mixed. Let's grab a little bit of that from the beak. I'm just going to bring this up where I see it's a little bit darker. Just like that. So you're always mixing. Bring a little bit of that in here too. That would be the wet, darker feathers that have that look to them. All right, now you can use a fan brush if you wanted to get some really, you know, fluffy textures. But what I think I'll do, because not everyone has a fan brush, I'm going to take my my larger round. I'm going to grab some of those colors. I'm going to pinch the hairs so they spread apart a little bit, and then I'm just going to flick back here a little bit, that little bit of a fluff going. Grab a little bit of that, a little bit of that. I'm going to tap it on my palette, make sure I don't have too much. And add that into the tail as well. You don't waste very much paint when you do this because you're always grabbing from stuff you've already mixed, and you are you're making use of it. And unless I have a big blob on my palette, or like you can see here, unless I have an actual blob that I could use on my palette, I just wipe it off after I'm done, and I find that I usually don't have too much paint left over. You know, because I keep my paint dried in those pans for the most part. Sometimes I'll squirt out a little dab if it's something I don't often have, like in a pan. Like if it's like a white gouache or something, I wouldn't typically have that out in a pan anyway, so I'll just use it that way. I want it a little bit darker over here, just doing a few adjustments. I'm going to clean my brush off and spread that out a little bit. That's a little too clumpy for my liking. And I'm actually going to soften the edge. In fact, I think I'll go in with a scrubber brush. I like these Menta scrubbers. They're a tack-on brush. They're like a really short-haired tack-on brush, and they do not damage your watercolor paper. You can use it to scrub out lighter areas. I want the edges of those tail feathers to be lighter. I find that tissues or paper towels do a better job than rags at lifting. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is dry this really quick, and then maybe we'll go in with a little bit of colored pencil if we feel like we need it. One thing I forgot to do though was to add a little bit more of that brown, the burnt umber, into the eyes. So I'm just going to pick it right off the pan. I had left some of the areas just unpainted on the eyes, so I just wanted to go in and add that brown. And I'm also just looking for any like little clumps of fur I might want to add with that while I have it on my brush. And if you get anything that's too dark, you can always just soften it with a damp brush. Now before you go, if you're going to go add any pen or pencil or anything like that, you definitely want to make sure that your picture is dry. This is my heat tool here. You can also use a hair dryer. If you're using a hair dryer, just hold it back a little bit. I like this just because it's really, really quick, and I use it for stamping as well, so I always just have it on my table. Okay, so I do have some microns, and if your paper's not dry and you use micron pens, then it will be bad for the pen. The pen will just stop working, so you do want to kind of keep that in mind. Sometimes doing a little fun, you don't have to do this. This looks fine the way it is. If you want to leave it the way it is, that's totally fine. I thought it'd be fun to just kind of really pull in some detail here. So I'm going in, I'm going to darken around the nose. I'm going to add just some detail around. You can do as little or as much as you want. And something that's kind of fun is to actually do your drawing in pen. You could draw it in pencil first, make sure you have it the way you want, and then outline in pen, and then erase your lines. You can have a really interesting ink and wash look that way. Now what I'm going to do is actually flip it upside down to do the other eye, because sometimes I find that if I've gotten my eyes off, I don't necessarily know right off the bat, and then I might not notice until it's all done and it's like the next day, and then I'm like, oh no, I messed that up. So by turning it around, it helps me make sure that I am getting it in proportion. And that does a good job at like just kind of sharpening things up. Another thing I like to use is a white gel pen. This is the one that I prefer. This is the Uniball Signo Broad. And I just find it works really well. It doesn't seem to get clogged up, and it lasts a lot longer than other brands that I've used, so that's why I tend to go with that one. So what I'm going to do is put a highlight in the eye first. I always find that adding that highlight always seems to like make the painting really come to life. And we've got highlights on the beak. Now if I'm doing highlights on something that's not quite as shiny, I will often just kind of tap it with my finger, so that I can kind of take away some of that really bright sheen. You know, just kind of get in there and just kind of tap it. But if you find that's too bright for what you want, here's my next favorite thing to use, and that is you can see I like them because I have them in various states of shortness. In fact, this one actually is in a holder. I have to take it out if I want to sharpen it. A white Prismacolor color pencil. These are wonderful. You can get these at any art supply store individually, and they come in pretty much any set of Prismacolor you're going to buy is going to have the white. It's quite opaque, but it's not as opaque as the white gel pen. So you'll find that you can get those kind of in between, more subtle highlights that you might want. Like there's so many highlights on this beak because it's smooth and hard and kind of leathery, and it just has more of, you know, a reflective quality to it. The gel pen is just a little too bright for that, so by using a colored pencil you just get a little bit better, more accurate highlight. I mean, we did a lot of our highlighting when we painted it just by like using those lighter colors, but it's just another option. Or if maybe you didn't quite get the color just the way you wanted, you have this option to go back, and it does kind of save the day a bit, and it's fun. I don't know, putting those highlights in is just so satisfying at the end of a painting. And I really love mixing Prismacolors with my paintings. It's just I just think it looks really nice, and it's just such an easy way to get a little more depth, and it can be quite a time saver too. Look at that cute face. I'm going to add a little bit of this to the top of the fur here. And you notice like whenever if you've got like animals, the edges of the fur will glow, kind of like the puppy painting we did last week. And then you can do that also with your Prismacolors. You can get those really fluffy, glowing edges. I like the way that looks. I think it's real pretty. You could also use shades of like warm grays in here too, because there is a lot of gray in the fur. That's completely up to you, depending on what sets of Prismacolors you have, if you have those colors. I also want to get a little bit of a shine in the feathers in here. I might need to use some gel pen to get the sheen that I want, but just keep turning your pencil as you go, and you can get that. You can get a nice sharp line. So depending on how you apply it, you can get the sheen of like a slick down area, or you could get the fluff. You can get like a soft fluffy look. I'm going to go back to the gel pen to get the highlight right along here, right along the edge of the body. You could also use gouache. Gouache is an opaque watercolor. I'm kind of explaining a lot of stuff because I want this painting to be really good for beginners. So, like, those of you that have painted me me for a while, you're probably like, Lindsay, durr, we know all this. What are you doing? Why are you over explaining all that? And it's just because new people find the channel all the time, and I want to make sure that, everybody's got a good, they're starting off on the right foot. I do have some classes too, like essential tools and techniques for watercolor is really good if you want to get going on watercolor in the most efficient way and kind of learn everything you need to know in about 6 hours or so, and then be ready to paint whatever you want to paint. So you can see as I start to do some of these wider lines, the pen is not the most efficient job for this because you have to keep kind of like scribbling side by side to get those thicker lines. So what I like to do in that case is use a gouache. This is Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. This is probably the most opaque white gouache that I have. It works wonderfully. And I'm going to clean off my brush really good and just dip into the jar. A lot of times I'll take a little palette knife or something and scoop out some, but I don't need that much, so I think that'll be fine. I can use my palette if I need to remove some off my brush, but then I can go in and I can do these wider ripples in the water. So, a lot of people will also use, you could use like a calligraphy pen to apply this. I find brushes are much more reliable. I'm honestly just using a little spare bit. I don't know if you can even see that little spare bit on my palette to just put that white there. But yeah, the Bleed Proof White is such a nice product. And if you don't want to use any products like this, you can use the white of the paper. Just either paint around the ripples, or like we did kind of up here, or use masking fluid before you begin you'd want to do that on dry paper. You can use masking fluid, and that just preserves the white of the paper. So it depends on how you like to work. If you're gonna enter watercolor competitions, a lot of them do not allow gouache. I think a lot of things have eased up over the years, but you just want to, if you are painting something for a competition, just make sure that you know the rules, if you can use white gouache or not. The way I used to be a purist, I used to be like, yeah, I'm not using white paint, that's cheating. But then I'm like, you know what? If it gets you to where you want the painting to be, what's the difference? Who cares, right? That's the way I look at it now. I think it's good to learn how to just use the white of the paper, but I think that you should paint in a way that brings you joy and satisfaction. So now that I've got that white in there, I think I would like a little bit of contrast. I'm going to take some burnt umber, going to add it to a little bit of that Hooker's green, because I'm noticing that under the water the duck looks a little green. And not a lot, but a little bit. I'm going to add some of that just under that highlight. I'm painting around my highlights. You don't want to paint over the gouache, because if you do, it's going to get muddy. I want to get those feet back in. And anything that's under the water can be distorted with the water, so you can just put some little streaks. I can go in with any of my blues if I want to as well. Add any those same shapes we were doing with the white we can do with the other colors. I hope you found this to be an easy yet an inspiring and educational tutorial. I was talking in a video the other day about how people tend to like kind of easier tutorials or shorter tutorials, and I thought, you know what, why not put out maybe some easier ones. This one's not necessarily shorter, it's not shorter at all, but hopefully that doesn't discourage anybody who wants to learn how to paint. I'm using a bigger brush here because as you go away the ripples are going to be bigger and blurrier. And you could really fuss with this for a long time and you know, if you're having a good time and whatever you're doing is adding to the picture, go ahead. Alright, there we have it. I'm really happy with how this came out. I think that duck is just adorable. I hope you enjoyed this. If so, please give me a thumbs up. I do appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more about watercolor painting, I have a couple classes to recommend. One is Essential Tools and Techniques for Watercolor. That is a very beginner-focused watercolor class, and it takes you from soup to nuts on how to learn how to paint with watercolor. It's a very robust class, and it's really designed for beginners to get started off on the right foot. The other class is Texture Toolbox, Feathers and Fowl, and it talks about painting the texture of feathers and birds, and it walks you through a few step-by-step paintings so that you will you'll be able to paint a few different instances of birds and feathers and get a good variety under your belt so that you'll be able to tackle whatever bird you want to paint in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting. Oh, all those will be linked in the video description, by the way. Okay, bye!